Welcome once again to Let's Talk Marriage. This is Pastor Larry coming to you this Wednesday afternoon with Let's Talk Marriage. All right. We're going to get right on into our program on today. Hope everyone is doing well. If you woke up this morning, you are doing well. All right, we're going to get right on into our program today. Our program today is we're going to be talking about some of the reasons why married couples fight, argue, have disagreements, or sometimes are not on the same page. Now, when you see a lot of times when you see a movie, everybody's getting along, everybody seems to be just one big happy family. They're running in slow motion. They're holding hands, and and the wife wake up in the morning, always have makeup on, her hair is already done. She go to bed looking lovely, wake up looking lovely. The husband's tall, and striking resemblance, and and they just getting along. The kids are, just hi mom, hi dad, like that, and honey, and darling, and sweetheart. And sometimes when you first get married, it's like that as well. For you newlyweds out there, it actually really should be that way. But there's some things you should find out before you walk down the aisle. We've talked about that on one of the programs, things that you should know before you walk down the aisle with someone. One of the things that, and this is sometimes an argument with couples, is whether you're going to have kids or not, how many kids, when to have kids, and things like that. When that's not discussed before you get married, it can become a concern during the course of the marriage. So what we're going to be doing is I found an article on Psychology Today, which is a really good magazine that covers a lot of different topics. It's talking about some of the reasons why married couples argue, and I'm going to go over some of them. There's quite a few on here, believe it or not, but I'm going to go over as many as I can on here. And the first question is, or the first reason they have listed on here why married couples argue is religious matters. That's one of the questions I mentioned that should be discussed before you get married. That's why the Bible said don't be unequally yoked. Sometimes it'll work out, sometimes if it's ordained, it will work out. But for the most part, you should not be unequally yoked. In other words, you don't want to, if you, for instance, you're a Christian and, and you're seeing someone that's a Muslim, that's a conflict waiting to happen. And if you go ahead and get married, they're going to still have their beliefs from their religion. Of course, you're going to still have your beliefs from your religion. And if you try to go to church or something like that, then it's going to be an issue. And then one party stays at home, and the other party don't go. Then there's constant argument because there's disagreement. Even if you're both a Christian, that's something that can happen because the spouse might not like the church that you're attending, the husband might not like it, or the wife might not like the church that you're attending. And we are, again, I mentioned one time before that we are creatures of habit. If you were raised in a church, you're more likely get married in that church, and more than likely you might attend that church. If you don't leave town or move out of town, you might attend that church after you get married. And if the husband don't like it, then that can become a conflict, especially if you don't agree with some of the doctrines or the teachings that they might have in that particular church. So that's something that should be discussed on there. And that's actually number one on here. Here's another one, demonstration of affection. Sometimes people argue about that because uh, the husband don't know what the wife is looking for, and sometimes the wife doesn't know what the husband is looking for. That's why something like that should be discussed. And sometimes it's not an easy discussion to have with your spouse because when you first get married, everybody's all excited and everything, but then you come to a point where you set back into reality. Some things you might have did, the wife doesn't like, and some things you wife might have did the husband didn't like. So that's something that you have to discuss. And here's another one, which is number 3, is making major decisions. Now this topic can come up any time, no matter how long you've been married. Can come up any time in your relationship because you don't want one party or the spouse, the spouse or the husband or the wife going out making major decisions without discussing it with each other. And again, this can come up at any time during your marriage, so you have to make sure that when this occurs, you sit down and discuss it, so it won't happen again, or you try not to let it happen again. But that's number 3 on our list here. Making major decisions that does cause conflict within the marriage because you might not be in agreement with it. It might not have been discussed. So we have to make sure that we keep uh, the lines of communication open. And then sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes you forget. Sometimes you're not thinking. Which if you have a strong marriage, you can move on from that. But you do have to make sure it is addressed because you don't want it to keep occurring. So you have to make sure that you do address it. Number 3 on our list. Number 3. Number 3 is uh, intimacy. Intimacy. Sometimes you have that can be an argument within a marriage, especially if you've been married for a little while. Sometimes that can be a major argument, or sometimes it stem from a small argument to sometimes even a major argument because the husband might not think the wife is performing like she should or when she should, and sometimes the wife might think the husband is not being affectionate enough, and those things have to be discussed, and those are something you can get past. Some things that you argue about, you can get past them and move on. And that even though it might be might become a major issue, you can still discuss those things. And again, I always mention if you need to get therapy in any kind of area relating to that, you can also get therapy with that. But what, that's something you should mainly first of all discuss with your spouse, and that can be worked out. Okay, number 5. Conventionally correct or proper behavior. Sometimes that can be an issue, like if you have a spouse that seems to always embarrass you in front of people, or and you get back home and it becomes an argument. Oh, you said this, why'd you say that? And you shouldn't have said that, or you shouldn't have did that. And that can cause a issue within a marriage. So you have to make sure that those things are a lot of things that arguments that can be avoided if you just simply sit down and discuss things. If you sit down and discuss things, there won't be an argument to begin with. It'll be a discussion. A discussion and argument are two different things. So you want to make sure that if there's a disagreement, you have a discussion, not an argument. Okay, let's see. Number 6. Number 6 says career decisions. That can be definitely an argument. You come home, your husband come home from work early, and what's up? Why you here? I quit. Either quit voluntarily or, involuntarily. Uh, you know, that can be a issue because first of all, it's going to affect your income and the household income. So that has to be discussed. If you plan on leaving a job, make sure you have a plan. If you have a plan, that's fine. Especially nowadays, people make career changes every day. But the thing about it is that should be discussed. Something that should be discussed before you're married as well. Uh, and people don't do it, before you get married. What you do, and sit down and say, well, how are we going to react during a time of, like for instance, if there's one income, how are we going to act in the household? If there's involuntarily one income in the household, how do we handle that? That can be discussed before you get married. You might not have the right answer at that time, or you might give the answer that the person wants to hear, but at least you brought it to their attention before you walk down the aisle. And after you get married, that can be an argument because again, you're cutting into the income, and and if it's something that's a surprise, and then you have the part where the other party might be, oh, when you gonna get a job? We can't do this. We can, and that causes a lot of stress. So you have to make sure that those things are discussed. And when you walk down the aisle, first of all, it says for better or worse. And during those times, you have to encourage each other, not argue with each other. And that has broken up many marriages because of the lack of funds that one party might not be bringing in, and it make the other party feel inferior because the only one is working at the time. But that's the time you should come closer, and work with each other and encourage each other, and you'll get back on your feet. But you should have a plan, during those times. Make sure you have some sort of plan. Moving right along here. Here's another one that goes right along with the number 6. Finances, financial decisions. That can be with the making major decision, number 3. This is number 7. Finances, financial decisions. You should not make financial decisions like, for instance, you both are working, you have funds in the bank, and all of a sudden one party takes out a chunk of money and open up an account by themselves. You should never do anything like that because that causes a big conflict. First of all, they're going to want to know, what do you open your money for? What do you have in the account for? Because you're one after you get married. You are considered one. So you don't want to make financial decisions without your discussion with your wife or with your husband. Make sure those things, and that's another thing with communication. Communication is so underrated. But if you communicate, there would never be any secrets. There would never be anything that's missing in the marriage if you both communicated with each other. And it's easier. It's not as easy as it sounds, because as you say it, but when you communicate and not communicate, there's a big difference in the marriage, and you can always tell that. When you communicate with your spouse, that means that you're on one accord. And if you're not communicating, you're not going to be on one accord. One party's going to be going in one direction, the other party's going to be going in another direction. So you have to make sure that you're communicating with your finances and things like that. And and we've all done it before, where you didn't discuss something, you made decisions, we've all done it before. So no one is perfect, but you have to make sure that you make a point of, sitting down to discussing things that concerning the finances in the home, because it can cause conflict in a marriage. Number 8, relationships with immediate and extended family. Now, this is a big one. big. Now, for most people that get married, especially nowadays, one party is going to have children. Whether it's the wife that has kids already or the husband has kids already. Unless you get married where you both are very young, which doesn't happen nowadays. People don't get married that young anymore. But in the case when you get married as when you're young, there's a better chance of you both not having children. But if once you mature, somebody's going to have a kid, either the husband or the wife might have a child, and then you have children together, and then you have a blended family. Or if you both have kids before you got married and you put the two families together, that can be a big conflict in a marriage because sometimes the biological father might get into it with the mother over something she might have said to their stepdaughter, or and that can be a big argument. Sometimes it rolls over into the kids having arguments. So you have to be very, very careful in that area. You have to make sure you sit down, and that should be discussed before you walk there. That's another statement or thing that should be discussed before you walk down the aisle, especially if you already, each one of you have kids. If they're smaller kids, sometimes it's easier for them to get along because they grow up together. But if they're older kids, like adolescents or 12 and up, sometimes it's kind of hard to blend the family. So that has to be discussed before you walk down the aisle. Make sure you talk about how you're going to handle conflicts between the two families, between the two kids, and then you have the exes are going to always be involved pretty much throughout. So you have to make sure all of that is discussed, because sometimes that can cause a conflict as well. When you have the ex on the outside telling you this, telling you that, and then you have your husband telling you that, or your wife, or even with the wife and the ex-wife. So you have to make sure that those things are discussed before you walk down the aisle. So when it comes up, you'll be able to sit down and talk about it and not get into a heated argument, because you can get into arguments over that. That's a really good statement there. All right. Child rearing practices. That's another one that can be that can cause conflicts in a marriage or arguments in a marriage is child rearing. Because if you have a husband that was raised the old-fashioned way, then you have a spouse or wife that's raised the modern way. The modern way is, let me give you an example. The modern way is when your kid do something wrong, let's say it's a serious matter. They do something serious. Like do something at school, or where they got in trouble at school or something. And they come home, and the modern way would be you would sit down and discuss it with the child and say, you know what, I'm going to take your video games away from you, and you're going to be on punishment for a week. Go to your room, And then the other spouse might have been raised the old-fashioned way, where if you did something at school and you come home, the first thing they're going to say is, what'd you get in trouble for? I ain't going to be going down to the school and let me get my belt. That's the old-fashioned way, where you spank the kid and it's over with. They're not on punishment or nothing like that. You just spank them and it's over with. And, and one thing might be effective and one thing might not be effective. But, nowadays you can't really, society doesn't really allow you to go the old-fashioned way. But, it's in your home, so you do what you want to do. But that's something that's another thing that should be discussed before you get married. How will you discipline your children together? Do you do it the modern way, or you kind of mix it? Or you do it the old-fashioned way? Like, go get me a switch, For those of you that are older, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's how we were raised, you know. And if you did something wrong at schools, a lot of times you got a spanking at school too. And you know what? But if you think about it, the society or the children were a lot better when they. So I don't know whether the modern way is the best way, or you know, but psychologically or just looking from the psychologist's point, they tell you that you should not spank your children. So these things should be discussed again before you walk down the aisle. How are you going to the agreement on how you're going to raise your children? Because the husband might be hard nosed, and the mother might be, you know, modern, or it might be the other way around. The wife could have been raised the old-fashioned way, and the husband could have been raised the modern way. But you know what? To be honest, the old-fashioned way, children seemed a lot more respectful. Let me put it that way. They seemed a lot more respectful doing the old time way. But now, you know, they say things to mom and dad, and I've even heard children swear or curse around their parents, and you know, when years ago you would never do anything like that. So that's something that should be discussed. How you're going to raise your children. Okay, here's another number 10 is not too bad. We're going to stop at number 10, by the way. Number 10 says leisure activities. Sometimes you can get into arguments over what you're going to do or how you're going to spend your leisure time. Sometimes the dad might want to just sit at home and watch games all day, and the wife wants to take the family out, or you want him to take her out. And you know, you can easily get in arguments with that. But that's something you should discuss, and you know, and don't wait till it happened to try to discuss it. Discuss it when there's nothing going on. That way, you won't get into an argument with it, and you won't start bringing up those. Remember that time, and you know, you won't go that route. So you discuss things, you know, when the fire is simmered, when there's no argument, not in the middle of an argument, because you can't discuss anything in the middle of an argument. So that's number 10. Number 10 again is leisure activities, and you know, sometimes you might agree for your kids to go to certain things, and the mother might disagree with it. So you have to be on one page with that. And again, that's some things that should be discussed before you walk down the aisle. And a lot of that can be avoided. A lot of these disagreements can be avoided if you got to know the person that you married before you marry them. So don't marry somebody you don't know. You have to know things about people, how they're going to handle situations. And my wife and I were talking the other day, and we were saying how you have to see people in their worst element before you marry them, or before you have any kind of relationship with them, because that determines how they're going to react throughout your marriage. So these are things that can be avoided if you center around them and discuss them. They can avoid a lot of disagreements in your marriage. This is Pastor Larry. I'm going to be signing off until we meet again with Let's Talk Marriage. All right, all the music that you hear on this program is from an app called Whoop Triggers Plus. It's on the Android platform as well as the Apple platform. Until we meet again, this is Pastor Wilson, or Pastor Larry with Let's Talk Marriage.